On the death of Thutmose II, there were two factions in Egypt. One of the factions was Thutmose II's wife, Hatshepsut. Um, she was God's wife to Ammon during the time of her father's reign, which was a very peculiar ritual carried out by a queen of Egypt at the time of the Feast of Opet. Her responsibility was arouse the god sexually so that he would seed the land for the new harvest. So this was a quite high office for any queen to hold. Usually it was the king's chief wife who held the office. But when Thutmose I was alive, her father, she held the office. So she was favoured by her father for that appointment. She was the chief wife of Thutmose II. And of course, she was the daughter of Queen Ahmose. Now, Ahmose traced her family blue bloodline back to the 17th dynasty and beyond. So she came from real Wasset stock. And that gave Hatshepsut some high status, which is why she was married to her half brother Thutmose II, because he was the son of a minor wife, so it elevated his status. So when Thutmose II died, his son, who was Thutmose III, was the son of a minor wife also. So he had, from a genetic point of view, a very low status in comparison to Hatshepsut. So a very peculiar thing. Well, and also Thutmose III was the stepson of Hatshepsut, and she was also his aunt. So very peculiar family ties here. So a strange event occurred at Karnak. Now, in all cult deity temples, they had an open court, which only the very rich could go to. And what you did in these open courts was you loitered around until the bark of the deity came out of the Holy of Holies. So at the beginning of the day, the priests would load the statue of the deity into a wooden canopy, which was on a bark, a boat, and it was carried around the temple by the priests. When they came into the open court, they'd go round the open court and they'd stop and make prophecies. And on this occasion, when Thutmose III was there as a small child of maybe 3 or 4, the bark stopped and declared that Thutmose III would be the next king of Egypt. Now, we don't know if this happened when his father was on his deathbed, Thutmose II, and his supporters, Thutmose III's supporters, were worried that Hatshepsut was going to take over the throne. But by declaring that the boy would be the next king of Egypt, it meant that she couldn't do away with him. She couldn't have him assassinated, because there are two powers in Egypt. One is the king to make laws, and the other are the gods. So if a deity made a proclamation, it became law, and it couldn't be overturned by anyone. So it was a very clever move. In year 9 of Hatshepsut's reign, she sent a trade mission to the land of Punt. Wow, not many pharaohs actually achieved this. Not many kings achieved this in their reign. So those 5 ships were on a trading mission to Punt, and on their return, they brought back frankincense and also trees to be planted at Hatshepsut's mortuary temple, which would eventually be built at Dela Bakri. Now remember what would happen to achieve that status of a trade delegation to Punt. They left Wasset, the caravan, and the boats. The boats were disassembled into planks. They were carried across the desert with food supplies, water supplies, the trade goods for bargaining. The ships were assembled on the Red Sea. They sailed off to Punt, they did their trade mission, they came back, the boats were taken apart, the caravan, the soldiers, the bearers came across the desert. Anywhere between 6 to 18 months. So that's how difficult it was to have a trading mission to Punt. She also re-established the trade links from Kush in Central Africa, coming up and down the Nile, out to the Minoan Empire and into the retinue and Levant. So she did send some military expeditions out, probably just to put down local bandits, make sure those trade links were nice and strong. Because the more trade that occurred up and down the River Nile, the more taxation could be placed on the goods that were travelling. Hatshepsut did build lots of things in Egypt. She built temples at Beni Hassam and Minya. She had her tomb constructed in the Valley of the Kings. Originally it was going to be KV20 and it was going to be a double interment, herself and her father Thutmose I. But after her death, we can assume that Thutmose III succeeded to the throne and buried her as the chief, as the semi-priest for the day, therefore becoming the new Horus. But she does seem to have been moved around from one place to the next later on in history. There was a thought by Howard Carter that maybe she was re-interned in KV 60 because parts of her funeral furniture were found in there by Howard Carter. Her major building projects were at Dela Bakri and Karnak. At Karnak, she had two giant pink granite obelisks erected. Amazing, pink granite, can you imagine? It must have taken 5 or 6 years for those guys down at the Elephantine quarries to bash out the stone and then split the needle from the bedrock, drag it out, put it on a barge, sail it to Wasset. Then it was finally dressed. Then all the hieroglyphs were carved on the granite surface, which is a real tough stone when you're only using copper and bronze tools, and then erected into position as a freestanding object. Just blows your mind. She had a couple of suites also constructed at Karnak Temple. Remember, Karnak is really important for the Feast of Opet, which happens between Luxor Temple and Karnak Temple. Originally, Amun-Ra was one of the chaotic elements, so he was never able to seed the land. So a way of getting round this, when Amun-Ra became the king of the gods at Karnak, was to have another form of himself known as the Southern Harem. And the Southern Harem is what we call Luxor Temple today. Down there lived his other self that had a huge phallus to seed the land. Hatshepsut built the 8th pylon at Karnak, and she located it at the southern entrance. The pylon was going to become the southern entrance for the temple. So this was a huge investment. Remember, those inner core stones are jumbled together, but the outer core with all the ribbing on the corners, all has to be smoothed down. This was a big investment, and it was the investment for the Opet festival, which happened every August. So the intention was to create an overland route rather than going down the river in August, which would have been high flood during the season of Akhet. So every August there was a feast called the Feast of Opet, where Amun-Ra, his son Khonsu and his wife Mut left their Holy of Holies at Karnak, and at Mut Sanctuary as well, which was connected to Karnak by a processional way. They went down to Luxor Temple, and then his other self, his other form of Amun, could seed the land. So this again was a great occasion, a great state function which was carried out by kings of Egypt, and Hatshepsut, being the god's wife to Amun, knew exactly what had to be done. Pretty amazing. Her architect was Imni, and he was responsible for most of the statues which we have in our possession today. And her steward, who was also the royal steward and also the vizier, was a chap called Senamut, and he was responsible for all the building projects, the obelisks, the suites, the additions that were made at Luxor Temple, and also the building at Dela Bakri. Thank you for listening. I hope it's been informative. Don't forget to press that subscribe button. That would be really helpful if you had not already subscribed. Please encourage your friends to visit and view some of these videos, and if they like them, then they too can subscribe. Bye for now.